Hello and welcome to your very first episode of a Collider Horror Podcast. It is the Witching Hour. I am Perri Nemiroff, and I am so happy to be sitting across from my co-host for this show. It's Collider.com's Haleigh Foutch.
Hey guys.
I can't believe this is finally happening. It feels like a long time coming, like we haven't had enough horror coverage on Collider lately, so I am very glad to be sitting here and to be talking about horror with one of the best of the best. Haleigh, you're awesome. So what we're going to do for our very first episode here is we're going to talk about the year in horror so far. So 2018 horror, and we're going to do the past, so the movies that have already come out this year, the present, which is kind of Comic-Con and Fantasia and what just happened there.
Yeah.
And then the future. And the future obviously means movies that are coming out later this calendar year. But before we actually jump into that conversation, we have a very special shout out to give to someone right now. And before I even name drop him, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who submitted logos, because
thank you.
There were a lot and we had a tough time choosing.
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many great ones. Thank you guys.
So the one we wound up going with comes from Eric Labaz. And Eric, we can't thank you enough for putting that together. It really popped and caught our eye the second we saw it. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
And if you want to check out Eric's other work, he's got a website you could see. It's www.labazdesign.com, and that's spelled LABACZDESIGN. So go check out his work. Now we are rolling into the meat of our show, and to kick it off, we're starting with what we've already seen in 2018. Haleigh, good or bad, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I want to know, what's your favorite thing you've seen so far? Like, what's holding down your number one spot?
Oh, that's an easy one, because it's not just my number one in the genre. It's also one of my top of the year overall, and it's A Quiet Place.
Ah, yes, of course.
Is that like the least surprising choice ever?
No, I guess now that you say it, yeah, that adds up. Yeah, I really like The Quiet Place, but I think it's one of those ones that I just didn't catch the hype wave as much as everyone else, and I think it's like such a well-constructed, fantastic film, and I wish that I loved it as much as you did, because I see your excitement when you talk about it. Yeah, for me, I think it's got to go to, it's so hard. It's Annihilation, but Hereditary is really close.
Okay. And, it's funny because Hereditary is the one where I wish I kind of was part of the hype a little more.
Right.
I don't necessarily think the movie was overhyped for me, where part of my, I don't want to say unenjoyment, but, part of the reason that I wasn't as into it as everyone else is because they put it up on a pedestal and then it didn't meet that bar when I actually saw it. I think one way or the other, I would have had the same exact reaction, because my disappointment strictly comes from the end of the movie.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. But I do appreciate everything else that you see throughout, from the shot design. The score is incredible in that. The performances are fantastic. So I do recognize it as a great film. It's just not cracking my personal best list.
It's funny how that happens. And that festival buzz is such a dangerous thing. That's what happened with me in A Quiet Place. The festival buzz was like, it's the best movie you ever seen. And I was like, yeah, it is really good.
I do want to see what they do with that next, though. I'm hoping they go the anthology route, because that seems to have all the potential in the world, whereas, we've seen so many franchises kind of dig themselves a hole that they can't crawl out of by continuing a couple of characters, that same story that you've already started somewhere. And with A Quiet Place, there's so many interesting rules in play in that movie that if you apply those rules to another family, that to me sounds like cause to continue a series.
Absolutely. And I think that family's story feels told. Like,
exactly.
I love Emily Blunt's character in that film. She's what an amazing performance in any film, but like always genre performances get overlooked, and that one will be one of them that gets overlooked come award season. But like, Evelyn was a fantastic character. I just think her story is told, and I agree that world has so much you can build out into, even the little hints you get to see outside of their family realm.
Yeah.
So good.
So top for you is Hereditary, and top for me so far is A Quiet Place?
Well, top for me is Annihilation, but Hereditary
yes.
is just like nipping at its heels.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do like Annihilation as well. It's just a lot of the times when I come up with my favorite of the year, it definitely veers more towards my favorite, especially rewatchability. That also play. I put great value in rewatchability versus just best.
Yeah.
And I think Annihilation is fantastic. But when I look at the list that we've compiled here, and it's like, what would I want to watch if I could watch something right now? I think I would honestly choose A Quiet Place.
I would choose Annihilation. I love that movie.
At least we're both true to what we love.
Yeah, it only grew on me with time because we saw that together, right? And we both walked out
did.
like, what? I think I liked it. I don't know. But now every rewatch, I just realize how much I love it more and more.
Bringing that up, too, it makes me a little sad for some of the folks out there who didn't have access to Annihilation in the theater, because there are many reasons I think Annihilation is well-deserving of the theatrical experience, but one of the biggest ones is that feeling when you walk out and you just want to turn to the person next to you and be like, what? And kind of dig into this almost unsolvable mystery and try to figure out what everything meant. And to think about someone, sitting alone on their couch watching it on Netflix is a little disappointing to me.
It is. And the other thing I really feel sad about is that people don't get the experience of the sound design, because that movie's all about the sound. Same with A Quiet Place. Those are two movies that really depend on the sound to function the way they need to.
You know what else we saw together?
What?
Unsane.
Unsane.
And I will just tell everybody that Haleigh Foutch was sweating and she was super nervous, I was enjoying every second of it.
Yeah, that one definitely got under my skin because it's like super real. The stuff that he's touching on is real deal problems that women have to deal with. Not necessarily being, thrown in an insane asylum, but dudes trying to tell you your whole life what you should do and what you get to do.
It's freaky. And I actually rewatched it recently, and I was very excited that it was still just as good the second time around, where it's one of those movies where even though you know the ending and you know what's up, that just lets you go back and rewatch the entire thing with kind of like a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, I think that one's going to hold up really well over time, and it's not quite getting the credit it deserves yet. I mean, that sounds like such a pretentious thing to say, but I think it's true. I think that's going to be one of those sleepers that critical acclaim will come a little bit later.
It sounds accurate to me, because I do, even within our horror-loving community, it doesn't feel like many are saying, oh, that's one of the best I've seen so far this year. And
feels a little forgotten.
It does feel forgotten. I mean, how wide was its release, really, when it actually came out?
That's a good question.
Was it super wide? You know what? I got a computer here. I can look that up.
It definitely went to more theaters than your average low-budget shot on an iPhone movie.
Yeah. And the opening was just over 2,000 theaters. And,
solid.
Typically a wide-release movie like A Quiet Place, for instance, goes above 3,000. Yeah. So that's probably part of the reason.
It's still pretty solid for a movie like that.
I'm also just noticing now that I'm looking at the weekend numbers that it only had 3 weekends in theaters.
Wow.
3. That's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't do too well its first weekend out. It made about $3.8 million, but then you look at the per theater average, and it's under 2,000, which is it's not a good number there. No. So I can understand why they might have pulled it quick, but I still wouldn't have expected it to only be in theaters for 3 weekends. That's surprising and probably speaks to why nobody's talking about it right now.
And Soderbergh is one of those interesting filmmakers that film nerds get so into him and obsessive about him, but he's not a name that's going to draw your aunt from Minnesota, ooh, Steven Soderbergh's new film is out.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't Soderbergh that drew my mom, who is a horror lover, to the movie, but good word of mouth from me certainly did, and anything with the horror brand on it will always be a winner in the Nemiroff household.
Heck yeah, my mom's the opposite. She wants to keep it far away.
You know what else my mom is super into? Anything Collider. She sent me a photo today of her Collider Movie Talk t-shirt, and she made it look so badass too. She got the t-shirt and cut the sleeves off, and it's just the coolest thing ever.
Mom
and it makes me think, why didn't we sell t-shirts that look exactly like that?
I haven't met her, but I love her.
So what of everything we've seen so far this year would you say was the most disappointing? Because I had jotted a couple of those down on our list earlier, too.
There's 2 that come to mind for me, one of which is The Strangers Prey at Night. I'm a huge, huge fan of the original Strangers. However, as disappointed as I was when I saw that movie, I think it's growing on me over time. And especially, we talked about this when we filmed our review for it, but that one scene by the pool it's an all-timer scene, so it gives a big boost to the whole movie.
I think that's why I'm bummed that the movie overall isn't as great as it could have been, because that scene in particular, I mean, it's still, to this day, is one of my favorite scenes that I've seen all year.
Absolutely.
And, you know, given the tone and style of that movie, it does feel like one where, you know, a rainy Sunday afternoon, if you have nothing to do, it's fun to put on again. But when you think about where it came from and just like the pure terror of what The Strangers did when it first came out, and that was a movie that it wasn't just a good scare in the theater. That really got under a lot of moviegoers' skin, where, you know, every single time I was sitting at home and I would glance through a doorway, I would expect to see a person there or something like that. I mean, The Strangers Prey at Night, it doesn't have that effect on you. And I don't think that was their intention to begin with. But when you have a film that's so well known for that, to have it missing feels a little strange to me.
Yeah, that, and, you know, I think they tried to do a little homage to the character dramatics of the first film, and it just didn't carry. The family drama didn't work, and they all seemed kind of stupid.
I just got a flashback to our conversation after the movie where you described one death as like a hug death. For anyone who's seen the movie, they'll know.
Yeah,
That was just the best descriptor ever.
Holds on and dies.
So if I had to pinpoint one on this list, I think I'd have to go with The First Purge if I'm talking about the most disappointing, because it almost doesn't even feel fair to give it that label, because I'll say right off the top that I don't think that The First Purge is a bad movie at all. I think there's certain elements of it that I found very impressive. In particular, I thought the performances were great. Some of the action is shot very, very well. And just the whole style of that movie and that franchise overall, I think The First Purge plays into that very, very well. This is more of a personal thing that I've kind of wound up with the Purge movies. So when the first one came out, I was one of few who grew to really like that first movie. And the more I think about it, and especially when I revisit it right now in this day and age, and I go back, I like that it's confined to the home invasion plot and scenario, because it kind of feels boxed in. And, you know, maybe it's somewhat not fair of me to judge the quality of a movie based on what's going on in the real world and how I'm responding to all of that. But I've just personally hit a point where I'm not enjoying these movies anymore, and maybe that speaks to how effective something like The First Purge is, but I just walked out of that theater feeling unhappy and unsafe and scared, and even though certain characters are rising up and doing the right thing, it still didn't come through to me as much as I think it needed to in order for me to say to myself, oh, I want to see another Purge movie.
Well, the franchise has sort of, you know, it started fairly simple with a great high concept, but really focused on a family's fight for survival, and very much has become this angry political cry. And that absolutely will turn off certain viewers. I'm curious to see how they handle it in the new TV show they're working on, because it looks like they're taking it real serious. Mm-hmm. And it looks like the future of the franchise is taking this idea real serious.
Do you think that's the way they should be going? I mean, can you even think of an alternative? Because to be fair to them, the filmmakers working on this, I kind of can't. It's a high concept that maybe at one point could have existed all on its own on the big screen, and it could have been some fun, crazy horror concept that people just kept going back to see every single year. But at this point, I think the lines are blurring to a point where, because of what this concept is, they have no choice but to adapt and address it a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't want to dig into like real world stuff, but essentially that's what James DeMonaco is interested in doing now, is tying the allegories between what his films and what we're seeing happening in the real world, and that's going to inherently make it less fun. I think it's interesting because I think that makes it have more value intellectually and emotionally. I don't know that it makes it more entertaining. And I think there might be room for both if, let's say, Blumhouse wants to expand the franchise outside of DeMonaco's control. Like, I think there's room for a heist movie, but during the Purge, or the Purge on an island, or like really high concept, cheeky things like that could exist outside of these really serious films they want to make now.
Well, you just sold me on that. The idea of something like a heist movie, I mean, it kind of goes back to the home invasion thing where you kind of lock it into one subgenre of sorts or one style of storytelling. So, I don't know, I'd kind of be open to that.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing those. I don't know if it would be too much of a tonal clash for the franchise to like coexist in harmony, but who knows how long DeMonico even wants to hold the reins to this thing. It's already been such a long time.
Well, what else is he doing? Is he doing anything else but Purge movies?
I believe he is. Isn't he doing something with Frank Grillo, my number one fave?
Ah, that would make a whole ton of sense. A whole ton of sense. Directing wise, yeah. He had a movie called Little New York in 2009, and then it was The Purge Anarchy, Election Year, and then this other one, which seems to have a 2019 date on it, is called Once Upon a Time in Staten Island.
Yeah, that's the one with Frank Grillo.
Frank Grillo, Bobby Cannavale, Naomi Watts. Ooh.
I'm interested. And it's described as a coming-of-age family drama, which sounds like a really big, different turn for him.
I will take that. I don't mind seeing him switch gears a little bit.
I'll watch Frank Grillo do anything.
Yeah,
so
I think I'm right there with you.
One ticket sold.
Just to highlight a couple other things on this list, I will say Veronica lived up to the hype. I watched that while I was on the flight to Israel. I downloaded it and took it with me, and a whole bunch of people out there kept messaging me when that movie came out. Have you watched it? Have you watched it? And I was like, no, not yet. And then finally I did.
It's interesting what Netflix has put out this year has been really quite strong between that and The Ritual, which I really dug. They had Cargo, which is...
I haven't watched Cargo.
Cargo is really solid. It's almost more of a drama than a horror. It's like this emo zombie trend we're having right now where zombie movies are all about your feelings. This one's...
Emo zombie trend.
There's so many of them, Perri. But this one is specifically about a man he's been bitten by a zombie. He has his infant daughter, and he's trying to figure out how he can make her safe before he turns.
Who's in that movie?
Martin Freeman.
Ah, yes. I could picture the art on the main page of Netflix now.
It's really solid. They've had a lot of really solid ones this year.
Why didn't you tell me this before I sat down and watched Extinction yesterday? What a bummer, too, because it's from the director of Hounds of Love.
Oh,
you like Hounds of Love,
yeah.
too. And that was his follow-up feature. And, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, Extinction is another Netflix release, and it stars Michael Pena and Lizzie Kaplan. And, you know, it's basically what the title says, and it's just not very good. And I got the sense that maybe some of the people on screen weren't as invested as they could have been and didn't really want to be there. But normally I don't like making that assumption unless I know for sure, because it doesn't feel fair. But it was just radiating off the screen to the point where I couldn't ignore it.
Well, that was also one of the ones I believe that Netflix acquired from a big studio.
I think you might be right on that.
I think it was Paramount offloaded it, and that's always the sign of a bad one. Like, same with the Cloverfields, or maybe that was the one that was Paramount.
Cloverfield Paradox was from Paramount. I actually think you might be right about this one as well, though.
They just, if that's why it's on Netflix, you're probably not in for a very good movie. But the ones that Netflix seeks out at film festivals seem to be a lot better.
Mm-hmm. This article that I'm looking at here says this move is similar to the platform's pickup of Cloverfield Paradox, which Netflix bought from Paramount and then surprise released after the Super Bowl. So I do believe it was the same scenario here. But
yeah, that's not a good sign.
I don't like that trend is becoming a thing that you say it's not a good sign, because also we just had the Mowgli announcement too.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, I want to have faith. I don't want to be, I don't want to be stupid and ignorant about it too. I mean, there's a trend that's starting here, but hopefully that's not the case as much going forward.
If from a logical point of view, if a studio puts all this money into making the film, they're not going to give it away unless they don't have faith in it. It's just like the reality of it.
Well,
if they think it's going to be, a real blockbuster breakout, they're going to keep their hands on that.
And then there's that awkward middle ground, though, where it's like and it's the situation I imagine they were in with Annihilation too, where you've got this movie that, hey, maybe you think it's a really good movie, but does it have wide appeal? Is it worth funneling millions and millions of dollars into a marketing campaign in order to make money at the box office, or do you sell it and get that money?
Yeah, that's an interesting counter situation.
I don't know.
So yeah, maybe I'm being too negative. Sometimes really spectacular films will go straight to Netflix, I guess. And that's sad in its own way.
Well, you know, I think The Ritual and what were we just talking about? It was The Ritual and Veronica.
Yeah.
And Veronica are good examples of some quality films being made and released over there.
They also they picked up Before I Wake, which was one that, it's like a really old movie. I think it's like 5 years old or something.
Something like that.
It's been sitting on a shelf and they kind of saved it. And that's totally solid and worth seeing. It's not groundbreaking and it's not the best movie you've ever seen. It's not Mike Flanagan's best film, but it's totally worth watching. And like, that's actually a perfect score for Netflix. It's a total watch at home, be spooked out.
Yeah.
But you can still go to sleep movie.
And then they also stayed in the Flanagan game, and they got Gerald's Game, which was a great adaptation.
They're deep in the Flanagan game.
Ooh, yeah, I'm all for that right now. Is there anything else from this list you want to touch on before we move into the next phase of 2018?
Yeah, I actually did want to highlight a movie I really love that's kind of goofy, Mom and Dad, the Nicolas Cage movie.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
It's so much fun. That's one I feel like it came out so early in the year. It's not being talked about anymore, which is unfortunate. It's just such an anarchic, wild ride and totally knows how to use Nicolas Cage to the best of his crazy ability. That one and Revenge, which went to Shudder and Neon. That is a real deal, serious, intense bloodfest of a film.
I keep meaning to watch Revenge, and then I think because it wasn't available on iTunes or something, because I love Shudder, but one of my problems with Shudder is, like, you know, I fly a lot. So when I tend to catch up on things is when I can download them and take them with me on the plane. So I feel like that's what was keeping that out of my queue. But Mom and Dad is a lot of fun.
Mom and Dad's great. I think Revenge may not have hit streaming yet, so keep an eye out on your iTunes. I think they did theatrical, and then they're putting it.
I think you might be right.
I think Neon Theatrical released it, but it's worth seeking out and watching for when it does come to home video.
I will definitely be taking your advice on that, and also I do recommend checking out Mom and Dad
Come
as
in
well.
with a solid stomach.
Okay. So I won't be eating lunch or dinner while I watch that movie.
Yeah.
That is a good thing to be warned of well in advance. All right. Let's move into our kind of now segment of this episode, which is two things. So you guys very well know that San Diego Comic-Con just came and went, and there was a lot of horror content there this year. But on top of that, which often happens, is at the same time SDCC is happening, we normally have Fantasia happening as well. And Haleigh, you were lucky enough to go to Fantasia.
It was great. It was my first year there. It's an international film festival out of Montreal, and it's not just horror films, although they do showcase a lot of really great horror talent there. It's all kinds of movies. I mean, I saw this really fantastic South Korean arm wrestling movie called Champion that you should all watch out for if you like feel-good arm wrestling movies, because that's now a thing. But you know, they do showcase a lot of horror, and I did want to bring attention to some of the cool stuff I saw there. There's one called Cam, which I really enjoyed. It's about a cam girl who tries to log on one day and sees that she's being imitated by something or someone. Her account is already live and broadcasting, and it's this really tight exploration of online identity and our personas and how they overtake us. And it's also a really fascinating look at online sex work, which is a totally underexplored area. It's written by a former cam girl, so it's really non-judgmental. It's really insightful. That was one of my favorite things coming out of there.
Ooh.
I saw The Man Who Killed Hitler and then The Bigfoot, starring Sam Elliott, which is not at all the movie it sounds like it's going to be. It sounds like this grindhouse goofy thing, and it's actually a really serious character drama about the man who killed Hitler and then the Bigfoot, and like cycles of violence and the burden of legacy. And it's not a home run, but it's certainly interesting. And if you love Sam Elliott, which who doesn't, it's a great performance from him.
What's the vibe like at Fantasia? Because I've been to a bunch of horror festivals, but I haven't been to that one yet. And I feel like one of the main things I take from any horror film festival I've ever been to is just like the vibe and the community and how happy everybody is to be there and watch this sick stuff together.
Yeah, the vibe is calmer than the other horror festivals I've been to. It's maybe because it's not specifically horror-centric and horror fans love to party. But
says who?
Yeah, says every bartender at every horror festival ever. It's really all about it feels like it's all about the cinema there, and everybody just walks in sort of excited to get this, throwing everything at you, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. I mean, I saw a French film about deadly poisonous gas. I saw that was one that was a bummer. The film Cold Skin, which is like a fish people drama, but not good like The Shape of Water. I don't know. Some people are really going to like it. It's really artfully made, but it's so slow and pretentious.
It's random. I produced a short film for one of my non-thesis requirements in school, and it was about a fish man. Oh. So I was well ahead of the game.
Yeah, you were.
I think it was called The Marvelous Fishman.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was worth highlighting. Speaking of fish people, actually, this really great small coming-of-age film blew my mind, and that's BLUE as in the color. Mind.
So it didn't actually. Did it blow your mind, or? That's how I just read it.
No, it didn't blow my mind, but Blew My Mind is a very solid film. I think the director actually made it as her thesis film. She was still a student, and it's so strong. And it falls in line with like this trend that's been building over the last 10 years or so of films that look at female coming of age and sexual development as a sort of creature feature, like in line with, or Raw isn't a creature feature, but Raw and Teeth and films like that.
Nobody talks about Teeth. People should see Teeth.
They really should. It's super solid, and I was shocked to learn it was a student film.
Huh. I need to check this one out as well.
Yeah, it's good.
Anything else from Fantasia you want to highlight before we move into Comic-Con madness?
Quick notes, Nightmare Cinema is a cool one that's directed. It's an anthology film with a few horror masters behind it, including Joe Dante and Mick Garris and David Slade. It's, like most horror anthologies, a bit of a mixed bag, but the good ones are better than average. Another anthology that was there that I was excited about was Tales from the Hood 2. That was very much like the original, a combination of sort of controversial, really gut punches, and then totally ridiculous, silly stuff. There's one about a fake psychic who gets taken hostage by a group of gang members that are trying to find out where some money went. And it's, without a doubt, the best one in the film, and the whole movie's worth seeing for that. And then there are some really serious ones as well.
Oh, boy.
And then the last thing I would quickly point out is one called Our House that actually just came out from IFC Midnight, and it was not a total home run, but beautifully made and a really, really touching story behind the ghost story. It's just unfortunate that ultimately the ghost story becomes every ghost story you've ever seen.
You saw a lot while you were there.
Yeah,
Jeez.
girl, keep them busy.
I mean, that's the nature of a film festival. You don't waste a second. No. And it's also the nature of a Comic-Con where you don't stop for a second.
No.
Do you want to just go through the beginning? I mean, we were together almost the entire time, so we might as well just start on night one of Comic-Con this year. And yeah, so I'm pretty thrilled that New Line Cinema has kind of had this ownership now over Wednesday night at Comic-Con for 2 years. It started last year with It and Annabelle creation, and now they did it again this year, and they're using it for all of their horror properties, but mainly to put a spotlight on this Conjuring cinematic universe that they're building. And I was pretty pleased to start there. It started with a nice cocktail hour, a meet and greet. It really is always nice just kind of hanging out, and especially the first night of Comic-Con, having a drink or two, and getting to meet the filmmakers also. Yeah. That always just it starts the night off on this really like like a nice intimate note. You know what I mean?
It does, and they went the extra mile and made their drink like blood red with some beets in it. That was a nice piece of showmanship.
Yeah, it's always a nice touch.
But yeah, we got to speak for a good, solid minute with the star of La Llorona, and she was lovely and seemed really enthusiastic about bringing that story to the screen.
Yeah, that whole group really did too. I mean, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but they came into our shooting suite also, and I got to do an interview with the group, and Michael Chaves is actually a Collider fan, which was a pleasant surprise. But I guess we should just jump right into that footage in particular. I know we fall on different sides of the divide here, but of all the footage we saw at Scare Diego, I think La Llorona stuck out to me the most, mainly because, I mean, this is probably one of the pitfalls with having an event like this, and not that this was their intention, but essentially pitting the nun footage against La Llorona. Because the first thing you do when you walk out of stuff like that, I mean, even going to Universal and like, well, which did you like more? Yeah. So I think I took to the style of La Llorona a little more because, the nun looked fine. It felt a little stale to me, just a little bit, whereas La Llorona, it really dug into that 70s vibe, and it had a couple of scare tactics that I hadn't seen before, and I was just also very into the idea of the La Llorona tale, the story, and how that's applied to scares, in that she's this motherly figure, but a very malevolent figure as well, and I think he represented both sides of her in that footage we saw pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree with that last part. I do like there was a bathtub scene we saw that starts out very maternal and gets very creepy. You're right, we do fall on different sides on this. It was, for me, probably the most disappointing footage we saw there, just because I felt like I could... this happens when you watch a lot of horror movies, but I could just see all the beats coming. Like, every scare, I was like, to the second, almost like, here comes the thing. And that's, unfortunate, but I did like the styling of it, and I hope that they do a lot with this character, this, sort of ghoulish apparition. She's such a famous, legendary piece of folklore to a lot of people, and I think that movie's going to do huge numbers.
Well, I was telling you that I was surprised. So, immediately after Scare Diego, Haleigh and I went and we rushed back to the hotel suite, the shooting suite, and Copster and Joey were waiting, and we shot all these videos, and, I was betting on the nun outperforming La Llorona by quite a bit, because even before we went into that, I didn't have La Llorona on my radar at all. I had maybe once heard of The Children, which is what it was previously titled, but I was not thinking of that at all, whereas the nun has been on my brain since whenever they announced it, which is, it's kind of constant, too, because you had the announcement, you have Valak's presence in Conjuring 2, then you have the little stinger at the end of Annabelle Creation. We've been talking about it nonstop, but La Llorona really took off.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. It's such it's a really famous legend, and I think it's going to be huge as long as the film delivers enough to make word of mouth bring people back for a second weekend. But let's talk about The Nun, because that was the one that I was impressed by. That had more of a sort of Hammer horror gothy vibe to it, really dark inky blacks, and I don't really care that much about Valak as a demon, to be honest. Like, I enjoyed The Conjuring 2, but I wasn't like, I need a spin-off on this guy. And we're getting 2, I guess. But, so yeah, I went in with sort of lower expectations, and I was really pretty impressed by the atmosphere of it. The performances look really solid. It has a really strong style, which I think, not to diminish, like, La Llorona's use of the 70s, but we did that in The Conjuring, right? So, like, that's already the style of the existing franchise, and I like that The Nun is doing something different. It looks different, it feels different. Yeah, I was pretty sold on that footage.
I'm still sold on The Nun. Just because I liked La Llorona more doesn't mean I didn't like The Nun. But I think the one scene that really stood out to me from The Nun is that one that focused on Thaisa Farmiga's character, where she winds up in that central room and she's in all white and everybody around her is in all black, and just how Corin Hardy uses that as a really interesting and exciting visual tool because I don't want to spoil everything that happens in that moment, but what you see done with that coloring is very, very powerful and eye-catching. So I'm hoping for more visuals kind of along those lines.
I agree. I think if the footage is any indication, what we saw, this film is going to have strong visuals, much like, James Wan is known for his visuals.
That's for sure.
Why he keeps creating things that can be spun off into their own films.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about It Chapter 2 now, because that's obviously a high priority on many moviegoers' lists.
Yeah.
We didn't really see that much, but I was satisfied with what we got. One, because they had just started filming, so I didn't think we were going to get anything at all. But if you're a fan of the source material, if you're a fan of the first movie, there's something about cutting a good BTS reel together like that and seeing those actors in those roles for the first time. That's, it's chill-inducing. It's exciting. So as far as that goes, I think they pulled it off with that little video they showed us.
Yeah, it was cute, and it was I want to see more is what that means.
I know.
I want to see more. I mean, we got to see Bill Hader say, like, "What's up, losers?" or something kind of Bill Hader-y, but I want to see more. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. There's nothing about it that wasn't good except that I just am greedy and wanted a little bit more.
I feel you. I mean, I feel like that's also my whole thing at Comic-Con in general.
Yeah.
Like I want more from everything, and I guess that's something that the convention circuit has kind of trained us to be
Totally.
like, where you expect this big headline, and then when you don't get this big headline, but you get something else that's really solid, all you could think of is, where's my headline?
Where is my It footage?
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded that, but they
all
did
look great though. All the characters.
We
didn't get to see them talk or anything, but they all look right. And
yeah, I would say that.
I can't wait to see young Bill Skarsgård standing up to adults as Pennywise and see how that reads as opposed to little children.
I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's going to work. He's very talented. But
I think one of the ones I'm most excited for is James Ransone as Eddie.
Yeah.
I really like him, and I really wish he was more of a household name than he is.
Well, he might be now.
You never know. I mean, if the kids from the first It movie are any indication, their star power is going to go through the roof for everybody all over again for some of them. The other thing we got from Scare Diego is, of course, the announcement of Annabelle 3.
Yeah.
So that right there could essentially be the headline of the night. Annabelle 3 with Gary Dauberman writing and directing. So they announced that. Did you freak out at all?
I didn't freak out, but I really liked the idea of Night at the Museum with Annabelle. So, like, the basic setup that they told us is that Annabelle's sort of just coming after the Warrens' daughter, and she's going to use all the little beasties and ghoulies and trinkets and whatnots that they have locked up in their safe room to come for her. And I think that's a really cool idea.
I really liked Annabelle Creation, and I strongly, strongly disliked the first Annabelle movie. I was so disappointed because it also came roughly a year after The Conjuring came out, and I was just wowed, and that movie was on the top of my list for 2013, and I was so excited for more from that series. Then the Annabelle movie came out, and it was not good. I mean, there was very little that I could actually, I can't find, normally I'm very good at finding a little something to hold on to. I don't have it with that movie, but then.
I have one thing.
Oh, what is it?
It's the only film that ever actually successfully exploited my fear of sewing machines.
You have a fear of sewing machines?
I really do, and it's so dumb because I know they have so many safety mechanisms.
You make me feel better about my fear of the dentist.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Is there a word for fear of sewing machines?
I've never looked it up, but that's the only movie I've seen where they sort of used it in a rhythmic way to build tension, and I was like, oh my God, stop!
All right, one thing.
Yeah.
One thing. But then David Sandberg took Annabelle Creation in a very promising direction. But still, even though I think he turned the Annabelle movies around for me with that movie, I didn't walk out of Annabelle thinking, I need another Annabelle movie now. I thought that was it. Then when they announced what this story was going to be, oh, that sounds good.
It sounds fun. It sounds like the Avengers of the Conjuring universe. And, like, that sounds fun.
Yeah. And the fact that they didn't announce that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga were back as the Warrens, but you can't tease the Warrens and it not have them in it.
Be very upsetting.
That would be very upsetting, unless maybe it's their daughter all grown up for all we know.
Oh yeah, old Warrens, but maybe. They never, I mean, in real life, they carried on till old age, right? Just doing what they did.
Yeah. I mean, now I'm trying to, like, make sense of it, but even if it was an older version of the daughter and it didn't involve Ed and Lorraine as we know them from the previous films, you would think that they would need to come back in at some point and help her, unless she's got some operation on her own. But then I don't know if in real life she really does.
We'll see. They should bring back the Warrens, though. That would be the smart move.
That'd be a big winner. I mean, I do wonder, because they're still doing Conjuring 3 too, right?
Yeah. I mean, in theory, why wouldn't they? They make so much money.
That is true. I'm curious to see if The Nun makes big money. I think the last box office projection I saw was something like $35 million, which seems a little on the high end to me right off the bat. But then again, when I think about what the other movies have made, and also the fact that it's in the It slot from last year.
It's a really, that time of year, people are so actively looking for horror content. And this year is especially crowded all through fall. There's like a new release every week. Mm-hmm. But The Nun has name brand recognition that a lot of things that we'll talk about in a minute don't have.
Actually, I take that back. I'm looking at Annabelle Creation's opening number now, and it is $35 million. Right, I forgot it opened that big. All right, did you have something you wanted to hit next?
Yeah, I wanted to briefly talk about... which I don't think you saw, unfortunately, the Predator footage.
No, I'm so jealous.
That movie is going to divide fans like crazy. People are going to hate it. People are going to love it. People are going to be offended by it. It's like, it is Shane Black up and down and all over. It's like snarky humor. And they showed us a funny scene and they showed us an action scene. And the funny scene was really solid. It's gonna offend people for sure, but it just seeing Shane Black take his dialogue and give it to an ensemble was a blast. I was getting iffy on this movie after the reshoots and da 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 da. Now I'm back on excited.
Ooh.
I'm team excited.
I like to hear that.
Yeah, Roca hated it though, so
okay.
He's the other side of the equation.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay and see it. I think I had run out that day because I had the Impulse panel and I was in a panic. Yeah. And even if I stayed in there and watched that footage, I probably wouldn't have been paying attention out of nerves. So I probably wouldn't have liked it.
But you crushed the Impulse panel.
Yes. I'm so happy that's in the books and done. I was so nervous, but it was a lot of fun. The cast and creators behind that show also made my life a lot easier because they were a pleasure. They were super easy, open, and thoughtful with all the Q&A questions. And have you ever been to a panel in the Indigo Ballroom?
Yeah.
The vibe in there really felt right, because you remember someone told us, if you do a panel in there, there's a certain vibe in the air because people have to walk all the way over from the convention center.
It's a choice to be there.
They're there for a reason, and I definitely think that I felt that. And it was some of the smartest, most insightful Q&A questions from the fans in the audience that I've heard in a while. Like, nice. some really meaty stuff that I wish I thought of myself.
That's great.
Other San Diego Comic-Con things that we saw this year. The big one was obviously. Oh, do you have something else?
I was gonna say, maybe do you want to talk about Castle Rock and
go there first?
Big one, because then we'll be rolling into what's coming.
You're so
up.
good at building anticipation.
It's my writerly skills.
How many episodes of Castle Rock have you seen so far?
I've seen 3.
Okay, I am up to 2.
Okay.
So. Just to recap my initial impression of episode 1, because we ran a Castle Rock review on Collider Video, and at that point in time, I had only seen 1 episode, and I liked it. I liked the atmosphere, and one of my favorite qualities of a Stephen King book is basically atmosphere and him presenting these places as though they feel lived in, as though you can live in them too. And I think his world building is one of the many reasons why his work is exceptional, and I got a taste of that in the first episode. When it comes to a premiere episode wrapping up and leaving me dying for the next one, I can't say I felt that, but I was intrigued enough to, when I got around to it, wanting to watch another episode.
It's interesting. You're like, I feel like the only person I've talked to who feels the same way as me, which is like, yeah, good, but I'm not insane over it yet. I have liked it more with each new episode, but everyone else I'm talking to is like thoroughly obsessed with Castle Rock.
I definitely didn't feel that after, and I feel like a baby step in a positive direction after watching episode 2. But I mean, even after episode 2, you have this gigantic ensemble of characters, and minus Bill Skarsgård's character, there isn't really anything very specific to latch onto,
Yeah, I think it comes really slowly, and that's why I'm enjoying it more with each new episode. Like Melanie Linsky's character, I'm just finally getting a read on, and I'm suddenly very interested in her, but it took me 3 episodes.
Yeah, I've many questions about her because if you know where I am at the end of episode 2, she's definitely just one big mystery right now.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm curious about it being released weekly, if the buzz is going to stick around, because it's a sort of slow, pensive, novelistic show.
Worked for Handmaid's Tale.
It did, and that's not an easy digest, so maybe Hulu's onto something. We got sent all the episodes up to 7, so I'm struggling not to be just a greedy little person and watch them all immediately.
I'm a little jealous, but there's too much good content out there right now. And now I got a couple things on my list thanks to you with Revenge and anything else on a streaming service I can track down right now.
I don't know if you watched this, since we're talking about horror TV for a second.
I know where you're going.
I did want to mention The Terror, which was like my favorite show of the year so far, and I'm obsessed with it. And we didn't touch on it in the earlier section, so I wanted to mention it because it's an exceptional show.
Okay. I hear it is slow. It's a slow build,
it's
right?
Slow.
Okay.
It is a full-on, like, proper British drama. It's set like with this Navy expedition, and they're looking for some discoveries, but instead they find death and pain and torment and madness, and it's so good.
That was quite the pitch there. I'm in. We got that last panel now. Are we ready for the big one?
The big
All right.
one.
It's Universal. This year, Universal brought both Glass and Halloween to San Diego Comic-Con. Just right off the top here, it was such a thrill to see a slasher movie up there on the main stage being celebrated like it was. And
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh my God.
What a champion of the people.
Your set visit report went up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell everybody about how wonderful she is, because that was my big takeaway from the panel.
Just amazing. She's like, if you could think of what you would hope the women you idolized would become as adults, she's everything that you would want. Like, as a kid who grew up admiring her, she's the nicest woman. She's the most generous, kind, open. She gave us an hour of her time. She came in on a day that she wasn't filming and spent an hour getting in full hair and makeup and costume because she wanted us to get, quote, the Laurie Strode experience. She was so trusting that she passed around her phone to a room full of journalists to show us a photo. Like, she's just lovely and warm and amazing, and everything you saw on that panel isn't a show, it's just how she is.
I mean, she really just commanded that room. The second she came out, everyone in that audience was paying attention, and then all the stuff she said, too. It almost surprised me, because I don't think you really get a deep character study in very many slasher movie sequels, and just the idea of, especially because I hadn't really processed the idea of final girls suffering PTSD from what they had dealt with before, or, when I think about Scream, I mean, they do reference some of that a little bit, but not in the way that Jamie Lee Curtis described it on that panel. And I think that might give the movie a really deep and human quality to it that we don't often see.
There were hints of it in Halloween H2O, but that movie was trying to balance 2 different generations of viewers, and I think it did amazing things that we'll get into on another podcast. But we see her that she's become an alcoholic and that she struggles with this anxiety all the time. But I get the feeling that Halloween is just going to take that way to the next level.
And it looks good based on what we saw.
Oh, the footage.
It looks good. I was telling Riley about the footage on the Riley Roundtable recently, and as I was describing the scene we saw, I caught myself blending that with the beginning of OG Halloween, and I started to get really confused, but in the best way possible. The fact that those lines are blurring, and it feels modern and bright and terrifying, but it also still pulls from what made the franchise what it was to begin with.
Yeah, I agree completely. The cinematography feels fresh and exciting, but just so completely rooted in, the tradition of the original film. And it's very clear that Danny McBride and David Gordon Green are huge fans of the franchise, but above all, fans of the original. Mm-hmm. That's the vibe they're going for. They have stripped it down to its bare parts, and some of it feels a little flashier, like some of the camera decisions are just a little cheekier, but not in a distracting way at all, in a really smart and effective way.
Mm-hmm. I was definitely sold on that footage. I also was surprised how my heart melted during that one Q&A, and speaking of things making headlines, I thought that the footage itself would have done it, but that story was something else. At first, when he got up there, I'm like, what's going to happen here? I don't know about this. Yeah. And, he just gets into that story of how her performance and what that character chose to do essentially saved his life. Yeah. And it turned into this really beautiful moment. And especially as a big fan of horror in general, I don't know. Especially when I talk about slasher movies, most of the time I'm like, that's the kind of horror that I enjoy. That's fun. But every little thing you see, whether it's zany and silly or deeply dramatic, it can come into play at any point in your life. We're essentially a product of everything we've seen and experienced, and that includes our movie choices.
Well, that's so true. And I think there's a big reason why survivors of assault or violence or rape are consistently drawn to the horror genre, even though you would think it'd be like fairly traumatic to see those kinds of things. A lot of people, they get catharsis from it, and it does teach you how to handle real life shit. And when he was like, I asked, he had a home intruder, and he said he asked himself, what would Jamie Lee Curtis do? That's like real deal.
Yeah.
I could see myself doing exactly that.
There's no doubt in my mind I would do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought about it before. I mean, even with sillier examples, like let's say Final Destination, having me on high alert for anything that could fall on me. But, even just the idea of, sometimes you play those crazy scenarios out in your mind, and it's like, would you run up the stairs or would you not? I mean, I could take a cue from Scream with that, but in that instance, it was the wrong choice.
Yeah, I stay on the ground floor, people.
Ground floor and out the door.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we should probably move into our last segment of the show, because this is a long list of movies and we're going to highlight as many as we can here. So right now we're talking about what's on the way for the rest of 2018, and there's a lot of good stuff. We've had a lot of solid stuff so far this year, but it looks like it could be an especially strong October for the genre. So do you want to jump in first? What's your most anticipated?
Well, so that would be a battle between two, one of which is Halloween, which we just discussed, and then the other one is the Suspiria remake, which I am so excited. People are finally excited for it, because as soon as Luca was announced as the director, I was like, suddenly team remake. Mm-hmm. It sounds like the worst idea, but I love Luca's work, and this was even before, like long before I had seen Call Me By Your Name, which ended up being my favorite film last year. I think he's going to do such cool stuff with it, and I can't wait. It's going to look incredible. So actually, the team is very exciting, too. His cinematographer is the same guy who shot Call Me By Your Name. The writer is one of the people who wrote The Terror. I'm so excited. And, the cast is amazing. I wasn't totally blown away by the trailer that they put out, but I still have total faith, and especially after that CinemaCon footage just made people want to lose their lunch. And we just learned today that it's really long.
Yeah.
That's long.
That's not just long. That's a really long movie. What was it, 152 minutes or something like that?
It's punishing almost. But
okay.
I'm keeping the faith.
Yeah, I mean, if someone like Luca Guadagnino directs a movie like that and says it needs to be that long, I am inclined to trust him.
I like that Amazon's sort of building this shock campaign around it, like, how long can you last?
I kind of like that touch,
fun
too.
And cheesy.
It's a nice communal vibe to go into the movie with, too.
A little hucksterism going on.
Those are definitely at the top of my list. And I think the other one I would throw in right now is Hellfest. Oh. So I was interested in Hellfest because I liked the logline and I liked the cast that they were putting together quite a bit, particularly Amy Forsyth,
okay.
because you know how much I love Channel Zero, and she's the star of No End House. So I've like had my eye on her, and I really like Bex Taylor Klaus too. I
like her too.
I was very into the Scream series, but you know that cast has been wiped clean and recast, so I miss her on that. So I'm excited to see the two of them in this. But then the trailer came out. That is my kind of movie. That is my kind of movie. I love amusement parks. I love Halloween time because you get all of the haunted houses and everything. And who hasn't been in a haunted house and thought, what if that one person who you think is dressed up is really real?
Right.
So just the whole idea of what this is really piques my interest. The only concern I have is that, you know, Gregory Plotkin's other feature film as a director is Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension. And that's a little concerning. And I'm not saying I want to judge one person based on one film, because you never know what could have happened, especially with a studio franchise film like that. But I need him to prove himself. So I am very hopeful that I'm going to have as much fun with Hellfest as I did with its trailer. But a little trepidation there.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Plotkin is, like, you gotta, you know, add in the element of working in a long-running franchise with the found footage format, which is a lot to put on any first-time director's plate and ask for it to be a good movie. It can be done, but I'll be excited to see him take more of a cinematic approach to this. And yeah, the trailer looked good. Another one I'm really excited about is The Little Stranger, which is looks sort of like a fancy, highfalutin, sort of creepy ghost story type thing, and it's by the oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name right now, but the director of
Lenny Abramson.
I
love Lenny Abramson.
Of Room and Frank, which I am obsessed with.
Frank is it's just so out of left field and fascinating at the same time.
And yeah, both of those films really show an ability in Abramson to go super dark without losing the audience, and I find that really interesting in a sort of classic haunted house type film.
Admittedly, the trailer for this one didn't really do it for me, but because of all the talent involved, I will see it no matter what, but I can't say that I'm super excited about this. And I'm a big fan of his as well. I mean, not even just Frank, but Room, when it came out, it was one of my favorite movies of that year. So I'm rooting for this movie. I would like to like it. The one that I have my eye on, because I've been hearing about it for a very, very long time.
I know what you're gonna say.
Anna and the Apocalypse.
Oh, yeah.
Ever since that first screen, what was it, at Fantastic Fest that it premiered?
Yeah.
I had a couple friends who went there, and every single one of them who saw this movie, they're like, you are gonna love this.
I really dug Anna and the Apocalypse. I caught it at Fantastic Fest, and it is a Christmas zombie high school musical, which is a lot of ingredients, but it pulls them off pretty well. It's got this young cast. The main girl who plays Anna is just like made to be a star. She's amazing. I can't wait for that to become sort of in the rotation for horror fans around Christmas time. You know that's going to be one that's going to have a lot of midnight screenings.
Yes, please.
People are going to get together to watch it and sing along. The songs are so good. And a little plug here, Collider will actually be co-presenting that as the closing night film at the North Bend Film Festival next month, where I will be on the jury.
Oh, I'm so excited for you.
But that does not make my review a bit biased in any way. You can go read my full written review on Collider, which was written long before this.
Glad we cleared that
yes.
up. I'll file one of these in the morbid curiosity folder, and it's Slender Man.
Ooh.
I think Slender Man's just been through so much nonsense lately that you know me well enough. I don't like to walk into something just not liking it before I've even seen it, but those trailers were unsettling in a bad way. And then when you heard about everything that was going on behind the scenes with the release date and potential studio shifts and all that kind of stuff, I got a bad feeling about this, and I am expecting to walk into it just to see how bad it really is. I hate admitting that.
No, I get it, though. And it's one of those things where, like I was talking about earlier, when a studio tries to offload something, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
It's a shame there's so much to do with that, that's such a popular myth now that was born of our time. and it just doesn't seem like anybody's totally figured out what to do with it. We'll see.
I refuse to end this episode on a negative note, so I want to throw out one more that I'm looking forward to, and I think I'm going to go with something a little silly and say The House with a Clock in its Walls. Okay. One, because I like the idea of Eli Roth doing something a little more kid-friendly and goofy. And have you seen that trailer? Yeah. I will watch Cate Blanchett in that role all day long. So between those two things, I kind of want to have some fun with that movie.
I'm excited for that one. I'm excited for, Eli Roth's Amblin. And the trailers look super solid. I'm really sold. And I can't let us end without mentioning this once. Mandy, Nicolas Cage, chainsaw fight. I have missed it at every freaking festival, and I'm dying to see it.
I want
Give
that.
Me
and
Mandy.
Andrea Riseborough, one of my favorite actresses right now. Yet another one who I really am just waiting for the day where she is a much more familiar name than she already is. Because
she so deserves it.
Yeah, not enough people are paying attention to her. And it might be because she's so good, because she's such a chameleon in every single role where she never looks the same.
It's true.
Ever. All right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we did it.
We did it.
It's the end of the very first Witching Hour podcast.
Yay.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this and for all the support leading up to this first episode.
Yes,
We've definitely been feeling the love on social media, and it means a lot to us because making this happen was very important.
Yeah, we worked hard on it. I'm so glad it finally happened.
I'd say so. All right, so we've got to wait a whole week until the next episode of the Witching Hour. So, Haleigh, where can everybody find you on social media in the meantime?
Yeah, you can find me every day on Collider.com, writing about all the good stuff, including lots of horror. You can find me on Twitter at Haleigh Foutch, and you can find me on Instagram at Haystack McGroovy.
And you guys, of course, can catch me on Twitter and Instagram at Nemiroff. Please go tell all your horror-loving friends about the Witching Hour. Thank you so much for listening to episode 1. Congratulations, you have survived the Witching Hour.